My name is Harper Sullivan, and I'm 32 years old. Right now, I'm lying on a gurney in the emergency room, blood dripping from a gash on my forehead, 3 broken ribs making every breath feel like knives stabbing my chest. My phone is clutched in my trembling hand, the screen cracked but still glowing with my father's text message. I'm at lunch with clients. Can't leave. Handle it yourself. Those 13 words that just cost him $15 million. Because 15 minutes ago, I discovered something that changed everything. The brake lines on my car weren't faulty. They were deliberately cut, and I know exactly who did it, because she just walked past the ER entrance with a smirk on her face. My stepmother, Vivian. Before we dive into this story, I'd love to know where you're watching from. Drop your city or country in the comments below. And if you've ever felt invisible to someone who was supposed to love you, hit that like button and subscribe, because this story is going to take you on a journey of betrayal, survival, and the most expensive text message in history. Trust me, you won't want to miss what happens next. I need to take you back 15 years to help you understand how we got here. I was 17 when my mother, Diane Sullivan, died from pancreatic cancer. It happened so fast. 3 months from diagnosis to funeral. My father, Richard Sullivan, was a successful tech entrepreneur, CEO of Sullivan Technologies, worth about $80 million at the time, but money couldn't save my mom. I remember holding her hand in hospice, her telling me to take care of Dad, to be strong, to make her proud. I promised her I would. What I didn't know was that her death would turn my father into someone I didn't recognize. The grief consumed him. Instead of leaning on me, his only child, he buried himself in work. 18-hour days at the office. Business trips every week. Our big house in Palo Alto became a mausoleum where we passed each other like ghosts. My senior year of high school, I ate dinner alone 300 nights. I tried everything to connect with him. Cooked his favorite meals that went cold on the table. Left notes on his pillow. Sent him my report cards, my college acceptance letters, photos of me at graduation. Nothing worked. He was physically present, but emotionally gone. And I was drowning in loneliness, missing my mom and losing my dad at the same time. I went to Stanford to study business, thinking maybe if I followed in his footsteps, he'd notice me again. I imagined us having lunch meetings, discussing strategy, becoming partners. During my sophomore year, that fantasy died completely. Dad called me to say he was bringing someone to Parents' Weekend. Her name was Vivian Blackwell. She was 35, 13 years younger than him, a former executive assistant who'd met him at some industry conference. I remember the way she looked at me that first meeting, sizing me up like I was a competitor rather than his daughter. Her smile was warm when Dad was watching, ice cold when he turned away. They got married 8 months later. I wasn't asked to be part of the wedding planning. I found out the date from a save-the-date card in the mail, like I was just another guest. The ceremony was lavish, 200 people at a vineyard in Napa, and I stood there in a bridesmaid dress I'd never been fitted for, watching my father promise to love this woman I barely knew. Vivian's vows talked about being partners, building a future, creating a family. When she said that last part, her eyes flicked to me with something that looked like triumph. A year later, my half-brother Camden was born. Suddenly, Dad had time for family dinners again, but I wasn't invited to most of them. Vivian would say things like, "Richard needs quiet time with his real family," or, "You're so busy with college, we didn't want to bother you." The subtext was clear. I was the ghost of his past life. Camden was his future. I tried to bond with my baby brother, brought him gifts, offered to babysit. Vivian always had an excuse. Hez napping. Hez not feeling well. Maybe another time. I graduated college with honors and started working at Sullivan Technologies in an entry-level position. I refused to use my last name to get ahead, worked 16-hour days, took on projects nobody wanted, proved myself through merit alone. It took me 8 years to climb to VP of Product Development. 8 years of watching Vivian redecorate my mother's house, erase every trace of her, turn my childhood home into something unrecognizable. 8 years of shortened phone calls with Dad, canceled lunches, forgotten birthdays. 8 years of watching him transform into Vivian's puppet, agreeing with everything she said, defending her against any criticism. My only ally was my Aunt Margot, my mom's sister, who lived in Boston. She saw what was happening, tried to talk to Dad about it, and got frozen out for her trouble. We'd talk on the phone every week, and she'd remind me that Mom would be proud of who I'd become, even if Dad couldn't see it. Those calls kept me sane. Camden was 9 years old now, a spoiled kid who'd been taught by Vivian that I was the mean half-sister who was jealous of their perfect family. He'd repeat things to Dad that Vivian had clearly coached him to say. Harper was rude to me. Harper didn't want to play with me. All lies. But Dad believed them every time. 3 months ago, everything started to unravel. I was reviewing quarterly financial reports, something I did routinely as part of my executive duties, when I noticed irregularities. Money moving in ways that didn't make sense, offshore transfers to shell companies I'd never heard of. The amounts were staggering. Over 3 years, approximately $15 million had vanished from Sullivan Technologies. I spent weeks tracing the digital trail, working late nights in my office, building a case. Every lead pointed in the same direction. Toward the CFO's office. Toward my Uncle Raymond, Dad's younger brother who'd been with the company for 30 years. And toward Vivian, who had access to everything through Dad. I scheduled a meeting with Dad to tell him what I'd found. The meeting was supposed to happen next week. But the day after I told him, I'd discovered financial discrepancies and needed to discuss them urgently. My car suddenly had brake failure on the highway. That wasn't a coincidence. That was attempted murder. The attacks actually started 3 months before the car accident, though I didn't recognize them as attacks at first. I was preparing for the biggest presentation of my career, a product launch that would bring in a projected $20 million in new investment. I'd spent 6 months developing the technology, building prototypes, running tests. The board meeting was scheduled for 9 in the morning, and I had my presentation files loaded on 3 different drives, backed up on the cloud, triple-checked, and perfect. The night before the meeting, I was doing a final review at home when my laptop crashed, completely dead. I tried to reboot it, nothing. My external hard drive wouldn't read. I logged into the cloud to download my backup files, and they were corrupted. Every single one. Months of work, gone. I sat there staring at the screen, my hands shaking, unable to process what was happening. This couldn't be random. This couldn't be coincidence. But I didn't have time to investigate. The presentation was in 8 hours. I stayed up all night recreating the entire presentation from memory. Graphs, statistics, projections, every slide rebuilt by hand. I showed up to the board meeting running on coffee and adrenaline, my eyes burning, my voice hoarse, but I delivered that presentation flawlessly, answered every question, addressed every concern. The board voted unanimously to approve the $20 million investment. It was a triumph, and it should have felt amazing, but all I could think about was those corrupted files. How did that happen? During the meeting, I watched Vivian sitting in the back row. Dad had given her an observer seat on the board, something that made no sense since she had no business experience. Her face during my presentation was strange. She looked angry, almost furious, like my success was a personal insult. When the board applauded the vote, she didn't clap. She just sat there, staring at me with those cold eyes. 2 days later, I found the answer. Our IT department keeps detailed logs of all network access. I requested the logs for the night my files were corrupted, citing security concerns. What I found made my blood run cold. Someone had accessed the company servers using credentials that traced back to Vivian's home computer. They'd specifically targeted my files, introduced malware designed to corrupt them, and wiped my cloud backups. This wasn't a random hack. This was deliberate sabotage. I printed the evidence, highlighted the relevant sections, and went straight to Dad's office. He was sitting behind his massive desk, the one that used to be covered with photos of me and Mom, now displaying only pictures of Vivian and Camden. I laid the evidence in front of him, explained what had happened, showed him the digital trail. His response? Vivian doesn't understand technology. This must be some kind of mistake. Maybe someone used her internet connection. You can't seriously be accusing her of this. I tried to make him understand the severity. Someone had committed corporate sabotage. This was a crime. His response was to tell me not to create drama, that Vivian had been nothing but welcoming to me, and that I needed to stop looking for problems where none existed. He refused to investigate further. Case closed. I walked out of his office feeling like I'd been slapped. A week later, I was at dinner with major investors from Japan, discussing expansion opportunities. We were at an upscale restaurant in San Francisco, the kind of place where the wine list costs more than most people's monthly rent. When the check came, I handed over my company credit card, the one I'd used hundreds of times for business expenses. The server returned, looking uncomfortable. "I'm sorry, ma'am, but this card has been declined." I felt my face flush with embarrassment. The investors exchanged glances. I apologized profusely, paid with my personal card, and excused myself to call the finance department. The finance manager told me my corporate card had been suspended for exceeding the limit. That was impossible. I tracked every expense meticulously. She sent me the recent charges, thousands of dollars at luxury boutiques I'd never visited, designer handbags, shoes, jewelry, all purchased in the past 2 weeks, all at stores I knew Vivian frequented because I'd seen the shopping bags in Dad's house. I requested security footage from the stores. Every purchase was made by Vivian using a duplicate of my card. I brought this evidence to Dad too: video footage, purchase receipts, timestamps, undeniable proof that Vivian had stolen my corporate card information and racked up charges that got my card suspended, humiliating me in front of critical business partners. Dad looked at the evidence for maybe 30 seconds before saying, "Don't make this into something it's not. Vivian made a mistake. She probably thought it was her card. I'll handle it." Handle it meant he paid off the charges and told me to let it go. No apology from Vivian, no consequences, nothing. That's when I realized I was completely alone in this. Whatever was happening, whatever Vivian was doing, Dad would never believe me. Had chosen his new family, and I was just the inconvenient reminder of his old life. I started keeping copies of everything, backing up files in multiple locations, documenting every interaction. I didn't know what I was preparing for, but I knew I needed protection. 2 months before the accident, I made a mistake that nearly destroyed me. I trusted the wrong person. My Uncle Raymond had always been kind to me, or so I thought. He was Dad's younger brother, 55 years old, CFO of Sullivan Technologies for the past 15 years. He remembered my mom fondly, would tell me stories about her and Dad when they first started dating. He seemed like the one family member besides Aunt Margot who actually cared about me. When I discovered the financial irregularities, the offshore transfers, the missing $15 million, I needed help from someone who understood the company's financial systems. I approached Raymond in his office, closed the door, and laid out everything I'd found. Spreadsheets showing irregular transfers, shell company registrations traced to offshore accounts, patterns of embezzlement spanning 3 years. The total amount was staggering: $15.3 million systematically siphoned from Sullivan Technologies. Raymond's reaction seemed perfect: concerned, supportive, appropriately shocked. He told me this was serious, that we needed to investigate carefully before alarming Dad. He suggested we work together quietly, gathering ironclad evidence before presenting it to the board. It made sense. I trusted him. Over the next week, I shared everything I'd found, every document, every trace, every lead. I gave him complete access to my research. 2 days later, I got called into a meeting with Human Resources. The HR director, a stern woman named Patricia, sat across from me with a manila folder. "Harper, we've received a serious complaint about you. You've been accused of inappropriately accessing confidential financial files beyond your authorization level. There's also evidence suggesting you may be attempting to frame a senior executive for financial crimes you yourself committed." I felt like the floor had dropped out from under me. The complaint came from Raymond. Had submitted a formal report claiming I'd been acting erratically, making wild accusations, accessing systems I had no clearance for. He presented emails I'd never sent, documents with my forged signature, an entire fabricated narrative of me as an unstable employee trying to cover my own embezzlement by blaming him. The evidence was sophisticated: digital timestamps, email headers, metadata. Someone had gone to enormous trouble to frame me. HR launched an investigation. I was suspended with pay pending the outcome. For 2 weeks, I sat at home, my career hanging by a thread, my reputation destroyed. I hired a private investigator with my own money, a former FBI forensic accountant named Marcus Webb. I gave him everything I had, told him to find the truth. Marcus was thorough, meticulous, brilliant. He traced the fake emails back to their real origin, found the digital fingerprints that proved the documents were forged, discovered that Raymond had been systematically creating this false trail for weeks, preparing to sacrifice me if anyone got too close to the truth. When HR completed their investigation, they found insufficient evidence to proceed with charges against me. I was reinstated, but the damage was done. People looked at me differently, whispered in hallways. My professional reputation had been questioned. Dad called me into his office and said words I'll never forget. Raymond has been with me for 30 years. His family. You've been difficult ever since Vivian joined our family. I need you to stop causing problems. I realized then that Raymond and Vivian were working together. The embezzlement scheme wasn't just Raymond acting alone. Vivian was the architect. She'd seduced my father specifically for his wealth, brought Raymond into the conspiracy, and they'd been stealing millions for years. I was the only obstacle because I was smart enough to notice the discrepancies and cared enough about Dad's company to investigate. Marcus Webb continued digging. What he found was terrifying. The embezzlement was just phase 1. Vivian and Raymond were planning to frame Dad for financial crimes, force a scandal that would tank Sullivan Technologies' stock, then buy up shares cheap through shell companies. Vivian would divorce Dad, taking half his wealth in the settlement. Raymond would emerge as the hero who saved the company, taking over as CEO. Dad would be left bankrupt and disgraced. And me? I was supposed to be discredited or dead before any of this happened. I had a meeting scheduled with Dad for the following week. I was going to tell him everything, show him the evidence Marcus had compiled, beg him one last time to listen. That meeting was scheduled for Tuesday. On Monday afternoon, my brakes failed on Highway 101, and I crashed into a concrete barrier at 45 miles per hour. 1 month before the accident, Vivian tried to kill me for the first time. I didn't realize it then. I thought it was just bad luck. A terrible coincidence. Now I know better. It was a family dinner, rare because I was almost never invited anymore. Vivian called me personally, her voice syrupy sweet. Harper, darling, Richard has been so stressed lately. I think it would mean the world to him if you joined us for dinner this Saturday. Just family. A chance to reconnect. I was suspicious. Vivian had never been warm to me, never called me darling, never suggested family bonding. But I was desperate for any connection with Dad, any sign that I still mattered to him. I said yes. Aunt Margot happened to be in town that weekend, visiting from Boston, so I asked if she could come too. Vivian's voice went cold for a moment before she recovered. Of course. The more the merrier. The dinner was at the Sullivan Mansion in Atherton, the house that used to be my home, that used to hold memories of my mother. Vivian had redecorated everything in stark white and chrome, erasing every trace of warmth. Dad greeted me with an awkward hug, the kind you give distant relatives. 9-year-old Camden ignored me completely, playing on his iPad. Vivian was the perfect hostess, pouring wine, complimenting my dress, asking about work like she actually cared. We sat down to a meal prepared by what Vivian called their new private chef: mushroom risotto, herb-crusted salmon, roasted vegetables, and expensive Bordeaux. Everything tasted fine, maybe slightly earthy, but I attributed that to the mushrooms. Aunt Margot and I made conversation while Dad checked his phone, and Vivian smiled that strange smile. I drank 2 glasses of wine, ate everything on my plate, tried to enjoy what felt like the first normal family dinner in years. 2 hours later, I was in Aunt Margot's car when the cramps started, stabbing pains in my abdomen that made me double over. Then the nausea, the vomiting, the fever spiking so fast I started shaking. Margot drove 90 miles an hour to the nearest emergency room. I barely remember the admission process. My body was shutting down. I vomited until there was nothing left, then kept vomiting. The doctors ran tests, gave me IV fluids, tried to stabilize me while I drifted in and out of consciousness. I was unconscious for 18 hours. When I finally woke up, Aunt Margot was sitting beside my hospital bed, her face drawn with worry. The doctors told me I'd suffered severe food poisoning, possibly from toxic mushrooms. The toxicology report showed amatoxins in my system, the poison from death cap mushrooms. In high enough doses, amatoxins destroy your liver and kidneys, killing you slowly and painfully. It ingested enough to make me critically ill, but not quite enough to kill me. The doctors said if it arrived an hour later, my organs would have started failing. I asked where Dad was. Margot's face hardened. I called him from the ambulance. He texted back that he was at an important meeting and was glad you were okay. He hasn't visited or called. I looked at my phone. There was one text from him. Heard you're in hospital. Hope you feel better soon. There were flowers from Vivian with a card that read, "So sorry you're not well. Must have been something you ate before dinner. Hope you recover quickly." The hospital kept me for 4 days. They ran every test imaginable, monitored my liver and kidney function, pumped me full of activated charcoal and IV medications. Aunt Margot never left my side. She was furious, demanding the health department investigate the dinner, insisting this couldn't be accidental. But Dad called her and told her not to make a scene. The chef had been fired, he said. These things happen, don't be dramatic. When I was finally stable enough to go home, Margot drove me to my apartment in Mountain View. The moment I opened the door, I knew something was wrong. Furniture moved, drawers open, papers scattered. My apartment had been ransacked. We called the police immediately. They took a report, dusted for prints, found nothing. The strange thing was, nothing valuable was taken. My TV was still there. My laptop, jewelry, cash. What was missing were my files. Every document related to the embezzlement investigation. My computer hard drives had been physically removed from my desktop. My backup documents were gone from my safe. My cloud accounts had been hacked and wiped. I stood in my destroyed apartment, still weak from the poisoning, and understood with perfect clarity. While I was unconscious in the hospital, someone had broken into my home and stolen all my evidence. The mushroom poisoning wasn't an accident. It was attempted murder combined with evidence destruction. They'd tried to kill me and erase everything it found. I would have been completely helpless if not for one thing. It hidden a flash drive in a false bottom of my jewelry box, a trick my mom taught me when I was a teenager. That flash drive contained copies of the most damaging evidence. I couldn't stay in my apartment. I didn't feel safe. Margot helped me pack essentials, and I moved to an extended stay hotel, paying cash, registering under a false name. I changed all my passwords, got a new phone, became paranoid about every car that followed me, every shadow in parking lots. I contacted Marcus Webb and told him everything. He accelerated his investigation, working around the clock. What Marcus discovered made my blood run cold. Vivian and Raymond weren't just embezzling money. They were planning to kill Dad too, make it look like suicide after the financial scandal broke. They'd done this before. Marcus found records of Vivian's previous marriages. 2 wealthy older men, both dead under suspicious circumstances. One fell downstairs after mysteriously changing his will. Another had a heart attack that toxicology later questioned. Vivian had inherited substantial amounts both times. She was a professional black widow, and Raymond had been her accomplice for at least a decade. Marcus urged me to go to the FBI immediately, but I couldn't. Not yet. I needed Dad to hear the truth from me first. I needed him to believe me, just once, before strangers told him his wife was trying to kill him. I scheduled a meeting with him for the following Monday. I was going to bring all the evidence, lay everything out, beg him to listen. That meeting was scheduled for 10 in the morning. The car accident happened Sunday afternoon at 3, the day before I was supposed to tell him everything. Sunday morning started normal. I'd had my car serviced at the dealership 2 days earlier, just routine maintenance. My mechanic, a guy named Tom who had been going to for 5 years, had called to say everything looked perfect. Brakes, fluid levels, tire pressure, all good. I picked up the car Saturday afternoon, drove it home without any issues. Sunday, I needed to go to my office to print documents for the meeting with Dad. I had the flash drive with all the evidence, but I wanted hard copies, backups of backups. The drive to Sullivan Technologies headquarters in Palo Alto was clear, Sunday traffic light. I was on Highway 101, mid-afternoon sun glaring through the windshield, thinking about what I'd say to Dad, how I'd make him understand, how I'd convince him that the woman he loved was planning to destroy him. I was so lost in thought that I almost didn't notice when the car in front of me suddenly braked. I hit my brake pedal, nothing happened. My foot went straight to the floor, no resistance, no slowing. My heart jumped into my throat. I pumped the brakes again, harder. Nothing. The car was accelerating downhill, traffic getting closer, and I had no way to stop. 40 miles per hour, 45, 50. I yanked the emergency brake handle. The cable snapped like it was made of paper, completely useless. Terror flooded my system. I was going to crash. I was going to die. I swerved into the right lane, trying to avoid the cars ahead, my tires screaming, horns blaring, people yelling. I aimed for the shoulder, hoping to scrub off speed on the rumble strips, but the car was going too fast, momentum carrying me forward. The concrete barrier rushed up, inevitable, and I had maybe 2 seconds to brace myself before impact. The sound of the crash was deafening. Metal crunching, glass exploding, airbags deploying with the force of a bomb going off in my face. My head whipped sideways despite the seatbelt, slamming into the driver's side window. Pain exploded through my skull, my ribs, my entire body. The car spun, hit the barrier again, finally stopped. Steam hissing from the crumpled hood, airbag deflating, blood running into my eyes. I couldn't breathe. Every attempt to inhale felt like my ribs were stabbing my lungs. My vision was blurry, sounds muffled. I tasted copper, realized I'd bitten my tongue. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely unbuckle the seatbelt. Someone was knocking on my window, asking if I was okay. I wasn't okay. Nothing was okay. The paramedics arrived within minutes. They pried open my door, stabilized my neck, asked me questions I could barely answer. Name, date, what happened. I kept saying my brakes failed. My brakes failed. They loaded me onto a stretcher, into an ambulance. The EMT was starting an IV, taking my blood pressure, asking about pain levels. Everything hurt. My head, my chest, my left arm. I couldn't think straight. I needed to call Dad. Despite everything. Despite knowing he'd let me down 1,000 times before. Some part of me still believed that this time would be different. This time he'd show up. I was his daughter. I'd been in a car accident. Surely this mattered. I found my phone in my jacket pocket. Screen shattered but still working. I called him. The phone rang once, twice, 3 times, 4. I was preparing to leave a voicemail when he finally answered. Harper. I'm busy. His voice was irritated, like I was interrupting something important. I could hear voices in the background, the clink of silverware, restaurant sounds. Dad, I'm in an ambulance. My voice came out weak, shaking. I was in a car accident. My brakes failed completely. I crashed on the highway. I'm bleeding. I think I broke some ribs. He interrupted me. Can this wait? I'm at lunch with investors from Japan. Very critical deal for the company. I'm sure you're fine if you can call me. Dad, please. I think someone cut my brake lines. This wasn't an accident. I need to tell you something important about Vivian, and he cut me off again, his voice sharp now. You're being paranoid again. We've talked about this. Your brakes probably just failed. Old car. These things happen. Handle it yourself. I'll call you later. Dad, wait. The line went dead. Head hung up on me. I stared at the phone, blood from my forehead dripping onto the screen. The EMT was asking if I was okay, if I needed anything. Before I could answer, my phone buzzed with a text message. From Dad. I opened it with shaking fingers. I'm at lunch with clients. Can't leave. Handle it yourself. 13 words. 13 words that felt like a knife through whatever remained of my heart. I was lying in an ambulance, potentially dying, telling him someone tried to murder me, and he couldn't leave lunch. The EMT gently asked who my emergency contact should be. I gave him Aunt Margot's number, my voice hollow. She answered immediately, promised to meet me at the hospital. We arrived at the ER, and they wheeled me in past the automatic doors. I was staring up at fluorescent lights, doctors ordering tests, nurses cutting away my jacket. Someone said possible concussion, internal bleeding, needed CT scan immediately. I should have been focused on that, on my injuries, on staying conscious. But all I could think about was Dad's text. Then I saw her. Through the chaos of the ER, through the open entrance doors, I saw Vivian's silver Mercedes pull into the parking lot. I recognized that car. Custom paint job, vanity plates that said VIVSUL. Vivian stepped out, dressed in expensive casual wear, sunglasses on despite the overcast sky. She was on her phone, talking to someone. She checked her watch, looked toward the ER entrance. Her expression was strange, anticipatory, like she was waiting for something. Then her eyes met mine through the window. For 1 second, she saw me on the gurney, very much alive, staring right back at her. The look on her face was shock, then pure rage. She'd been expecting different news. She'd been coming to confirm I was dead. She made a quick call, said something sharp into the phone I couldn't hear, then got back in her Mercedes and sped out of the parking lot like she was fleeing a crime scene. That's when everything clicked into place with horrible clarity. Vivian had cut my brake lines. She'd been checking to see if the murder attempt worked. She was furious I'd survived. This wasn't paranoia. This wasn't coincidence. This was premeditated murder, and I had just enough evidence left on that hidden flash drive to prove everything, if I lived long enough to use it. The doctors wheeled me toward radiology for the CT scan. I grabbed the nurse's hand. "Please," I said. "The police need to examine my car. The brake lines were cut. Someone tried to kill me. Please make sure they investigate." She nodded, squeezed my hand, promised she'd notify the police. As they slid me into the CT machine, I made myself a promise too. If I survived this, I was going to destroy everyone who tried to destroy me. Starting with my stepmother. I spent 2 days in the hospital. Concussion, 3 broken ribs, multiple lacerations requiring 23 stitches, internal bruising that turned my entire torso purple and yellow. The doctors wanted to keep me longer, but I refused. I couldn't be vulnerable in a hospital bed where anyone could walk in. I checked myself out against medical advice and went straight to Aunt Margot's hotel suite. She'd extended her stay indefinitely, appointed herself my bodyguard and advocate. The police investigation moved faster than I expected. The mechanic who examined my wrecked car was thorough and honest. He called Detective Laura Chen directly with his findings. The brake lines had been cut with precision, using a specific type of cutting tool. The cuts were made in a location designed to fail under pressure, not immediately. Whoever did this knew exactly what they were doing. They wanted the brakes to fail when I was driving at speed, guaranteeing a serious crash. This was attempted murder, no question. Detective Chen came to interview me at the hotel. She was in her 40s, sharp-eyed, took detailed notes. I told her everything. The embezzlement, the previous attacks, the poisoning, Vivian and Raymond's conspiracy. I gave her names, dates, evidence. She listened without interrupting, her expression growing more serious with every detail. When I finished, she said, "Miss Sullivan, you need to understand something. What you're describing is a complex criminal conspiracy. This is bigger than attempted murder. We're talking fraud, embezzlement, possibly multiple homicides if Vivian's previous husbands died under suspicious circumstances." I asked for security footage from Sullivan Technologies' parking garage, where my car had been parked. Detective Chen requested it through official channels. That's when things got complicated. Raymond, as CFO, denied the request, claimed privacy concerns, said they needed a warrant. That told me everything. They knew they were on that footage. A warrant was issued, but it would take time. Meanwhile, Dad finally called, 3 days after the accident. His opening line was, "I heard you filed a police report claiming someone tried to kill you. You're embarrassing the family, Harper. Not asking how I was, not apologizing for abandoning me in the ER, complaining about embarrassment." I kept my voice steady. "Dad, someone cut my brake lines. The police confirmed it. This was attempted murder. The detective told me it could have been random vandalism. Teenagers, a prank gone wrong." You're making it about Vivian again because you can't accept that I've moved on from your mother. That hurt more than the broken ribs. Dad, this has nothing to do with Mom. I have evidence that $15 million has been embezzled from Sullivan Technologies over the past 3 years. Vivian and Raymond are stealing from you. That's impossible. Raymond has managed our finances perfectly for 15 years. You're making wild accusations because you're jealous. Dad, please, just meet with me. Look at the evidence. I have bank records, transfer logs, everything documented. They're planning to destroy you. His voice went cold. I don't want to hear this nonsense. You've been causing problems since Vivian entered our lives. If you continue with this investigation, it'll have no choice but to remove you from the company. You'd choose them over your own daughter? I'm choosing peace over your constant drama. Stop this now, or face the consequences. He hung up. I sat there holding the phone, Aunt Margot watching me with sad eyes. Has not going to listen, is he? I asked. No, sweetheart, has not. But that doesn't mean we stop fighting. It means we fight without him. She was right. I was done seeking Dad's approval, done begging him to see the truth. It was time to force him to see it. I called Marcus Webb and told him to take everything to the FBI immediately. No more waiting, no more hoping Dad would believe me first. Marcus connected me with Special Agent Victoria Torres, Financial Crimes Division. Agent Torres reviewed the evidence Marcus had compiled and made a decision within hours. Full investigation, federal case. But I wasn't content to let the FBI handle everything. I wanted public accountability. I wanted everyone to know what Vivian and Raymond had done. I hired Patricia Kowalski, a high-powered attorney known for taking on corporate fraud cases. Patricia reviewed everything and smiled. You have them cold. Criminal case will take time, but we can hit them with a civil lawsuit immediately. Sue for the embezzled funds plus damages for attempted murder, emotional distress, fraud. I authorized the lawsuit, $15 million in stolen money, $15 million in damages. Total claim, $30 million. Named defendants, Vivian Sullivan, Raymond Sullivan, and Sullivan Technologies for negligent oversight. The papers were served during Camden's 9th birthday party at the mansion. A process server walked past security, past the bounce house and pony rides, and handed Vivian the complaint in front of 50 party guests. Vivian's reaction was spectacular. She screamed, threw her champagne glass at the process server, called him vile names. The entire tantrum was captured on video by party guests. The assault was clear. Additional charges were filed. The story hit the news within hours. Tech Harris sues stepmother for $30 million, alleges murder plot. The media frenzy was immediate. Dad called me an hour later, absolutely furious. How dare you sue your own family? You've humiliated us publicly. I'm removing you from the company effective immediately. You're disinherited. You'll get nothing from me. I'd been preparing for this moment. My voice was calm, almost serene. Do it, Dad. I don't need your money. I never wanted your money. I wanted my father. But he died when Mom did, and I'm finally accepting that. Vivian is a thief and a murderer, and I'm going to prove it whether you believe me or not. You're going to regret this, Harper. The only thing I regret is spending 15 years believing you'd eventually remember you had a daughter. I hung up on him for the first time in my life. It felt like freedom. The lawsuit made national headlines. Sullivan Technologies stock dropped 12% in one day. The board of directors went into crisis mode, demanding an emergency meeting. Dad was forced to address the allegations publicly. He stood in front of cameras and defended Vivian, called me unstable, claimed the lawsuit was baseless. But the board wasn't convinced. They voted to authorize an independent forensic audit of company finances. Dad couldn't stop them without looking guilty. The counterattack had begun, and I wasn't stopping until everyone who tried to destroy me faced justice. The lawsuit changed everything. Once the story went public, people started coming forward. People who'd been silenced, scared, or ignored before suddenly found the courage to speak. My case gave them permission to tell the truth. Within a week, I had allies I never expected. The first was Gerald Hayes, Dad's former business partner. Gerald was 68, retired 5 years earlier under circumstances I'd always found suspicious. He called me directly, his voice shaking with emotion. Harper, I should have said something years ago. I'm so sorry. Gerald explained that He'd seen Vivian manipulating Dad from the very beginning. He'd warned Dad that Vivian seemed more interested in his bank account than his heart, that she was pushing out anyone who might challenge her influence. Dad had accused Gerald of being jealous, of wanting to control the company. Their partnership ended bitterly, and Gerald had walked away with his settlement, keeping silent to preserve some dignity. But Gerald had kept records, emails, financial documents, notes from meetings where Vivian had insisted on being included in company decisions, despite having no business background. Gerald had documentation of the early financial irregularities before Raymond even got involved. He'd tried to audit the books before he left, found discrepancies, and been stonewalled. Now he was willing to testify, to provide everything he had. I won't let that woman destroy what your mother and father built together, he told me. Your mom was a good friend to me. I owe her this. The second ally was completely unexpected. Sofia Rodriguez, Camden's nanny for the past 5 years, reached out through my attorney. She was terrified, insisted on anonymity at first, but had a story that made my blood boil. Sofia had watched Vivian coach Camden to lie about me. She had recordings on her phone, secret videos taken because she'd been disturbed by what she witnessed. The recordings were damning. Vivian's voice, syrupy and sweet, telling 9-year-old Camden, "Now remember, if Daddy asks, you tell him Harper was mean to you at the park. She yelled at you and made you cry. Can you cry for Daddy? Show me your sad face." "Perfect, sweetheart. You're such a good actor." There were dozens of these sessions. Vivian teaching Camden to manufacture tears on command, to repeat false accusations, to play the victim whenever Dad was around. My heart broke for my little brother. He wasn't a spoiled brat. He was a manipulated child, used as a weapon against me. Sofia also revealed that Vivian frequently left Camden alone for hours, while she met with Raymond secretly. They'd rendezvous at hotels, Raymond's apartment, even in Raymond's office after hours. Sofia had followed them once, worried about her job security if anyone found out about the neglect. She'd photographed them together, clearly intimate, clearly conspiring. She was willing to testify about everything if I could protect her from retaliation. The third ally was the most dangerous for Vivian. Diane Park, Dad's executive assistant for 20 years, came forward with evidence that shattered any remaining credibility Vivian had. Diane was 45, impeccably professional, and she'd hated keeping silent. She provided logs showing Vivian had accessed Dad's computer regularly, using passwords she'd obtained through manipulation. Vivian had read Dad's emails, deleted messages from me before Dad could see them, even forged his signature on documents. Diane had copies of emails I'd sent Dad about the embezzlement that He'd never received because Vivian had intercepted and deleted them. Urgent messages I'd written begging him to meet with me, to review the evidence, all erased before he could read them. Dad's rejection of me wasn't entirely his fault. Vivian had systematically sabotaged every attempt I made to reach him, making sure he only saw the narrative she wanted him to see. The FBI investigation expanded rapidly with this new testimony. Agent Torres discovered 2 former Sullivan Technologies employees who'd been framed for embezzlement years earlier, fired in disgrace, their careers destroyed. Both were willing to testify that Raymond had fabricated evidence against them when they'd gotten too close to discovering financial irregularities. The pattern was clear. Anyone who threatened to expose the conspiracy was destroyed. Then the investigation into Vivian's past husbands accelerated. Husband number 1, deceased 8 years ago, had allegedly fallen downstairs 3 days after changing his will to leave everything to Vivian. The original police report noted suspicious circumstances but no evidence of foul play. New forensic analysis of the autopsy photos showed bruising patterns inconsistent with a fall, more consistent with being pushed. Husband number 2, deceased 5 years ago, had died of an apparent heart attack, but his medical records showed no history of heart disease. Toxicology had been questionable. Exhumation orders were granted for both bodies. While the investigation built, Raymond panicked. Had been following the news, watching his conspiracy unravel. 2 weeks after the lawsuit was filed, he attempted to flee the country. Security footage at SFO caught him trying to board a flight to the Cayman Islands with $2 million in cash in a duffel bag. Federal agents arrested him at the gate. It was spectacularly stupid, and it destroyed any credibility he had left. Raymond's attorney immediately negotiated a plea deal. Raymond would cooperate fully in exchange for a reduced sentence. His confession was comprehensive and devastating. He laid out the entire scheme. Vivian had approached him 6 months before she met Dad, having researched wealthy tech executives in Silicon Valley. She'd selected Dad specifically because he was a widower, wealthy, vulnerable. She'd seduced him methodically, married him quickly before he could reconsider, and immediately began planning how to steal his fortune. The embezzlement started small, gradually increasing. Raymond handled the technical aspects, moving money through shell companies and offshore accounts. Vivian handled Dad, manipulating him, isolating him from anyone who might expose them. I was the primary obstacle because I was intelligent, cared about the company, and had access to financial information. The plan had been to discredit me, then eliminate me if necessary. The poisoning was supposed to kill me. When that failed, the brake tampering was the backup plan. The next attempt, already being prepared, was a staged home invasion where I'd be killed during a burglary. Raymond's testimony revealed the endgame too. After stealing enough money and ensuring I was dead, Vivian planned to file for divorce, claiming Dad had become abusive. She'd get half his remaining wealth in the settlement. Simultaneously, the embezzlement would be discovered and pinned on Dad. His reputation destroyed, Sullivan Technologies would collapse. Raymond and Vivian would buy the company assets for pennies on the dollar through shell companies, then rebuild under new management. Dad would be left bankrupt, disgraced, possibly facing prison time for fraud he didn't commit. With Raymond's confession on record, arrest warrants were issued for Vivian. Police arrived at the Sullivan mansion with a SWAT team, expecting resistance. Vivian tried to run. Security cameras captured her sprinting toward the garage in designer heels, trying to escape in her Mercedes. Officers tackled her before she reached the car. The video of her arrest, screaming obscenities, mascara running down her face, went viral within hours. Dad was there when it happened. Had been defending Vivian until the moment handcuffs went on her wrists. As they read her rights, she screamed at him, "Richard, don't let them do this. I love you. This is all lies. Harper's manipulating everyone." Dad stood frozen, watching the woman head chosen over his own daughter being dragged away in handcuffs. The evidence search of the mansion took hours. They found burner phones Vivian had hidden, documents about offshore accounts, a small bottle of digoxin hidden in her closet, the same poison found in her second husband's system. They found journals detailing her plans, including notes about my daily routine, my driving schedule, places she could stage an accident. Reading those entries later, seeing how methodically she'd planned to kill me, made me physically sick. Dad collapsed that evening, rushed to the hospital with stress-induced heart palpitations. I got the call from Aunt Margot, who'd heard from Diane. Part of me wanted to ignore it, let him face the consequences alone. But Margot's voice was gentle. "Has your father, sweetie. Whatever has done, has still your father, and has finally seeing the truth." I went to the hospital, not sure what he'd say, knowing nothing would ever be the same between us. 4 months later, the trial began. The prosecution had built an overwhelming case. The courtroom was packed with media, spectators, and everyone who'd been affected by Vivian's schemes. I sat in the front row with Aunt Margot on one side and Marcus Webb on the other. Dad sat 3 rows back, looking 20 years older than he had a year ago. The state charged Vivian with attempted murder, conspiracy to commit murder, fraud, embezzlement, and assault. Her defense attorney tried to argue she was a victim of Raymond's manipulation, that she'd known nothing about the financial crimes, that the accusations of murder were absurd. That strategy lasted about an hour, before it fell apart completely. The prosecution called me first. I took the stand and told my story calmly, methodically. The car accident, the hospital records showing mushroom poisoning, the timeline of attacks that escalated from sabotage to attempted murder. I presented medical evidence, police reports, forensic analysis. I explained the embezzlement I'd discovered, showed the financial trail. The defense tried to portray me as a jealous daughter fabricating accusations, but the physical evidence was irrefutable. My brake lines were cut. I was poisoned with amatoxins. The money was missing. Raymond testified next as part of his plea agreement. He laid out the entire conspiracy in excruciating detail. Dates, amounts, methods. He explained how Vivian had seduced Dad after researching his wealth and vulnerability, how they'd systematically stolen $15.3 million, how they'd planned to frame Dad and eliminate me. His testimony took 3 days, and by the end, Vivian's attorney had no effective defense left. Sophia's recordings were played in court, Vivian's voice teaching Camden to lie, to manipulate, to fake tears. The jury watched, horrified, as this woman coached a child to become a weapon against his half-sister. Several jurors were visibly angry. One woman was crying. Diane Park testified about the intercepted emails, the forged signatures, the systematic isolation of Dad from anyone who might tell him the truth. She provided documentation of every time Vivian had accessed Dad's computer, deleted my messages, manipulated his perception of reality. Gerald Hayes testified about the early warning signs, how Vivian had pushed out anyone loyal to Dad's first wife, how she'd gradually taken control of every aspect of Dad's life. The forensic analysis of Vivian's previous husband's deaths was presented next. The first husband's exhumation revealed significant evidence. His injuries were inconsistent with a simple fall downstairs. Fractures suggested he'd been pushed, had tried to catch himself, been pushed again. The second husband's toxicology came back positive for lethal levels of digoxin, the same drug found hidden in Vivian's closet. Expert witnesses testified that both deaths were homicides, not accidents. The evidence was so overwhelming that Vivian's defense attorney requested a continuance twice, trying to find some angle that might work. Nothing did. The pattern was undeniable. Vivian Blackwell was a serial killer who married wealthy men, stole their money, and murdered them when convenient. Dad had been next in line, saved only because I'd discovered the scheme in time. The jury deliberated for 3 days. When they returned, the verdict was unanimous on all counts. Guilty of attempted murder, guilty of conspiracy, guilty of fraud, guilty of embezzlement, guilty on every single charge. Vivian's face went white. She started screaming, actually screaming in court, pointing at Dad. "You owe me! I gave you the best years of my life. I made you happy when you were drowning in grief. You'd be nothing without me." The judge banged his gavel, ordered her removed. As bailiffs dragged her from the courtroom, she was still screaming obscenities, claiming she was the victim, that everyone had conspired against her. It was pathetic and terrifying at the same time. Sentencing came 2 weeks later. 45 years to life in prison without possibility of parole. Additional murder charges were filed in connection with her previous husband's deaths, extending her sentence to life imprisonment. She was 55 years old. She'd die in prison. The civil trial followed. My lawsuit sought $30 million, 15 in stolen funds plus 15 in damages. Vivian's defense tried to claim Raymond was solely responsible for the embezzlement, that she'd never personally controlled the stolen money. Asset tracing destroyed that argument. The money had flowed into accounts in Vivian's control. She'd spent millions on luxury goods, real estate, investments. The jury awarded me the full $30 million plus an additional $5 million in punitive damages. Total judgment, $35 million. The problem was, Vivian's accessible assets only totaled about $20 million. The remaining $15 million had to come from somewhere. That somewhere was Dad's fortune. Under California community property law, Vivian was technically entitled to half of all assets acquired during their marriage, but her criminal conviction changed everything. The judge ruled that Vivian forfeited all marital rights due to her criminal acts. Her half of the community property was awarded to me as partial satisfaction of the judgment. Dad lost $15 million from his personal wealth to pay my settlement. The board of directors at Sullivan Technologies voted unanimously to remove Dad as CEO. The company's reputation had been too severely damaged by the scandal. Dad's judgment was questioned. How could he not know his wife was embezzling millions? How could he ignore his daughter's warnings? He accepted a retirement package and stepped down. Gerald Hayes was brought back as interim CEO. The board approached me with an offer. Chief Operating Officer, second in command, tasked with rebuilding the company's reputation and implementing new financial oversight. They said, "You saved this company. You exposed the corruption when everyone else looked away. We want you to lead the recovery." I accepted on one condition: complete overhaul of corporate ethics, transparency measures, and financial controls. No more old boys club, no more conflicts of interest, no more ignoring warnings because they're inconvenient. The board agreed to everything. Over the next year, Sullivan Technologies slowly recovered. Stock rebounded, new contracts were signed. We implemented my mother's values, the integrity she'd always demonstrated, into every aspect of operations. I created a scholarship fund in her name for women in tech. I used a portion of my judgment to fund a foundation helping victims of financial abuse and domestic manipulation. Camden was placed temporarily with Aunt Margot while the courts figured out custody. He was 10 now, in intensive therapy to undo Vivian's psychological manipulation. It was heartbreaking watching him realize how he'd been used, how the mother he'd loved had been a monster. Slowly, carefully, I began building a relationship with my half-brother. We started with supervised visits, gradually increasing to phone calls, video chats, weekend outings. He was smart, sweet when he wasn't being coached to be cruel. One day he asked me, "Did you really save Daddy from the bad lady?" I told him yes, and he hugged me for the first time. Dad and I started family therapy. It was painful, slow, often frustrating. Head sold the mansion, unable to live with the memories of Vivian's betrayal. He moved to a modest condo in Menlo Park, started seeing a grief counselor to properly process my mother's death, something he should have done 15 years earlier. He attended therapy weekly, worked on understanding how completely Head failed me. The $15 million Head lost was symbolic of everything the text message had cost him. "I'm at lunch with clients. Can't leave. Handle it yourself." Those words, that choice to prioritize a business lunch over his daughter bleeding in an ER, represented every time Head chosen Vivian's lies over my truth, every time Head dismissed my warnings, every time Head valued peace over protection. The money was just numbers. What Head really lost was 15 years of relationship with his daughter, his company, his reputation, and very nearly his life. We'd never get those years back. Trust, once shattered so completely, might never fully heal. But he was trying, genuinely trying, for the first time since Mom died. Sunday dinners became a new tradition. Dad, me, Camden, Aunt Margot. No lies, no manipulation, just honest conversation and slow healing. It wasn't perfect, but it was real. 2 years have passed since that text message changed everything. I'm 34 now, sitting in my corner office at Sullivan Technologies, looking at a photo of my mother on my desk. She's young in the picture, maybe 30, laughing at something off camera. I keep it there to remind myself of who I'm doing this for. The company is thriving. We've rebuilt our reputation through transparency and integrity. I lead with the values Mom taught me, the strength she showed during her illness, the grace she maintained even when facing death. The scholarship fund in her name has helped 42 women pursue careers in technology. The foundation has assisted hundreds of people escape financially abusive relationships, recognize manipulation patterns, find safety and justice. My personal life has transformed too. Marcus Webb, the private investigator who helped me when everyone else abandoned me, became so much more than an ally. We started dating about a year ago. He proposed last month during a quiet dinner at my favorite restaurant. No grand gestures, no public spectacle, just honest love between two people who'd seen each other at our absolute worst and chose each other anyway. I said yes immediately. We're planning a small wedding for next spring. Garden ceremony, meaningful people only, vows emphasizing partnership and truth. It's everything a wedding should be, and nothing like the lavish show Vivian orchestrated when she married Dad. Marcus understands me in ways I didn't think possible. He knows my scars, my trust issues, my nightmares about break failures and poisoned food. Hez patient, kind, and genuinely good. Mom would have loved him. Dad has changed in ways I never expected. The collapse of his marriage, the betrayal, the near destruction of everything Hed built, broke something in him that needed breaking. He works as a consultant now, donates most of his income to my foundation, Hez in therapy twice a week, finally processing Mom's death properly, acknowledging the grief Hed buried under Vivian's manipulation. Hez not the same man who sent that text from a restaurant while his daughter bled in an ambulance. Hez humbled, smaller, but more genuine. Our relationship is still fragile. Some days I can barely look at him without remembering all the times he chose her over me. Other days I see glimpses of the father I had before Mom died, the man who used to read me bedtime stories and teach me about circuits and code. Well, never fully recover what was lost, but we're building something new. Hez walking me down the aisle at my wedding. That decision took months of therapy to reach, but it feels right. Not forgiveness exactly, but allowing the possibility of a future. Camden is 12 now, a completely different child than the one Vivian had molded. He lives with Aunt Margot primarily, spends weekends with Dad, and talks to me several times a week. The therapy helped him understand he was a victim too, manipulated and used as a weapon against someone who only ever wanted to be his sister. Hez, wickedly smart, especially with computers. I've been teaching him programming, business fundamentals, the same things Mom taught me when I was his age. Our relationship is one of the unexpected gifts that came from this nightmare. Aunt Margot moved permanently to California to be our family's anchor. She's 62 now, sharp as ever, the glue holding all of us together. She reminds me so much of Mom, not just in looks, but in spirit. That unwavering strength, that refusal to accept injustice, that fierce protection of people she loves. She tells me constantly that Mom would be proud of who I've become, how I fought back, how I refused to be silenced. Vivian is serving her sentence at a maximum security women's correctional facility. All her appeals have been denied. Additional murder charges were filed for her previous husbands, extending her sentence to multiple life terms. She'll die in prison. She's attempted to contact Camden through letters, but he refuses all communication. She tried to reach Dad once, some manipulative letter about how she still loved him, how sorry she was. He burned it without reading past the first line. Her story became a cautionary tale. A documentary came out last year called The Black Widow of Silicon Valley. I participated in the filming, wanting to help other potential victims recognize the warning signs. Manipulation, isolation, gaslighting, the gradual erosion of relationships with anyone who might tell you the truth. Since the documentary aired, 3 women have contacted me to say it helped them recognize similar patterns in their own marriages, helped them escape before it was too late. That makes the exposure, the reliving of trauma, worthwhile. I think about that moment in the ER often. Lying on the gurney, bleeding, broken, reading Dad's text. At lunch with clients. Can't leave. Handle it yourself. 13 words that cost him $15 million in legal judgments. But the real cost was so much higher. Those words represented every choice Hed made for 15 years. Every time Hed prioritized Vivian's comfort over my well-being. Every time Hed dismissed my warnings because believing them would disrupt his peace. Every time Hed chosen convenient lies over difficult truth. That text message nearly cost me my life. It cost him his daughter's trust, years we can't recover, his position at the company Hed built, his reputation in the industry, and very nearly his freedom if Vivian's plan had succeeded. All because he couldn't leave a business lunch when his daughter called from an emergency room. I've learned crucial lessons through this nightmare. Trust your instincts when something feels wrong. Document everything. Seek help from professionals when you're in over your head. Don't wait for validation from people who refuse to see the truth. Your safety matters more than keeping peace or maintaining appearances. Real family shows up, especially during emergencies. Actions, not words, reveal love. My advice to anyone in a similar situation is this. If someone repeatedly dismisses your concerns, ignores your pain, chooses others over you despite evidence of harm, believe their actions. Don't make excuses for them. Don't wait for them to change. Protect yourself first. Seek allies who will listen. Build your case carefully, then fight back with everything you have. The $15 million was symbolic justice, but money was never what I wanted. What mattered was acknowledgement. Vivian held accountable for her crimes, Dad facing consequences for his choices, the truth revealed publicly. My voice finally heard after 15 years of being silenced. That's priceless. My wedding day arrives on a perfect spring morning. Small garden ceremony, maybe 40 guests. Aunt Margot, Camden, close friends, Marcus family, a few trusted colleagues. Dad is waiting nervously near the entrance, fidgeting with his boutonniere. When it's time, I take his arm and we begin walking down the aisle together. Halfway to the altar, he stops, turns to me with tears in his eyes. Your mother would be so proud of you. I'm sorry I wasn't. His voice breaks. I'm sorry for all of it. The text message, the years I wasted, choosing her over you. I'm sorry it took almost losing everything for me to see what I had. I squeeze his arm gently. You're here now, that's what matters. We continue to the altar where Marcus is waiting, smiling at me like I'm the only person in the world. Dad places my hand in Marcus, then whispers, "Take care of her. She's stronger than all of us." Marcus responds quietly, "I know, sir. That's exactly why I love her." The ceremony is simple and beautiful. Our vows emphasize partnership, truth, choosing each other every single day through whatever challenges come. When Marcus kisses me, I feel Mom's presence somehow, her approval, her love transcending death and time. At the reception, I give a toast that's been months in the making. I thank everyone who stood by me, who believed me when it was hard, who showed up when it mattered. Then I say the words I've needed to say publicly. Sometimes the people who should love us most fail us. Sometimes we have to save ourselves. Sometimes fighting back costs everything. But standing up for truth, protecting yourself, refusing to be silenced, that's priceless. My father learned an expensive lesson. $15 million expensive. But the real cost was years we can't get back. Lunches with clients don't matter when your daughter's bleeding in an ER. Business deals don't matter when your family is being destroyed. Comfort doesn't matter when truth is screaming at you. I raise my glass, looking at each person who'd helped me survive. To choosing each other every single day. To answering when the people you love call for help. To believing victims, fighting corruption, and never letting fear silence the truth. Thank you for being my real family. The celebration continues into the evening. I dance with Marcus, laugh with friends, hug Aunt Margot until she tells me I'm wrinkling her dress. Camden asks for a dance, and I accept immediately. We're both terrible dancers, laughing as we step on each other's feet. He whispers, "I'm really glad you didn't die in that car crash." I whisper back, "Me too, buddy, me too." Dad watches from the corner, tears streaming down his face. He knows he doesn't deserve to be here, doesn't deserve my forgiveness or my grace. But I invited him anyway because healing requires extending chances we don't have to give, building futures we don't owe anyone. Not for him, but for myself, for Camden, for the possibility of something better than the broken past. As Marcus and I leave the reception toward our honeymoon, I think about how far I've come. The girl who was ignored, dismissed, nearly killed. The woman who saved herself, her company, her brother, and even her father from a fate worse than anything Vivian planned. The survivor who turned pain into purpose, trauma into triumph. The text message that cost $15 million taught me the most valuable lesson of all. Your worth isn't determined by who shows up for you. It's determined by who you become when everyone abandons you. I became someone my mother would be proud of. Someone strong, fierce, unwilling to accept injustice or cruelty. Someone who fights back. And that, more than any dollar amount, any court victory, any revenge, is worth everything. Now I want to hear from you. Have you ever been in a situation where someone who should have protected you chose something else instead? How did you handle it? What would you do if you discovered someone close to you was stealing or hurting your family? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. And if this story resonated with you, please hit that like button and subscribe to the channel for more real stories about survival, justice, and standing up for yourself. Share this with anyone who needs to hear that they're strong enough to fight back, that their voice matters, that truth always wins eventually. Thank you so much for watching, and remember, the people who truly love you will leave the lunch meeting when you call from the ER. Everyone else is showing you exactly who they are. Believe them.